Once upon a time, Kimberly was just going through the motions. Every once in a while, she'd find some happiness, but it quickly faded. She chased every possible way to make money because she thought money was the key to getting the happiness she longed for. Then, one day, she decided she was worthy enough to try a different path. It led her through the dark cave of fear, past the forest of doubts, and to the village of vulnerability. With each step, she trusted herself more. She asked for what she really wanted, and she started to get it. More happiness, more love, and yes, more money. Welcome to the next chapter of Kimberly's manifesting success story. Hello and welcome to this episode. I am your host, Cassie Parks, and I am back with Kimberly for another episode in her manifesting success story. Today, we're talking about criticism and growing through that, as well as growing into a coach and what those two things have to do with one another. So even if you don't want to be a coach, this talk on criticism is going to support you in growth and opening up and just being willing and open to grow in different ways. So, but I want to start, Kimberly, with how do you know it's happening?
It's always happening now. I just know that, and I trust it more. Plus, I have given myself the safety net of having you as my coach, so that I always am tapping into knowing that it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So, you had mentioned, which is why I wanted to do this episode, that you were more open to criticism. Even I want to say it was something like I enjoy criticism. I've really changed in that. So, to start out, define criticism for us.
For me, it's it's telling me I'm wrong or to stop doing something I'm doing.
So it's someone else telling you you're wrong or to stop doing something that you're doing. Okay.
Yes. It means that, so coming from a previous, probably still in there somewhat perfectionist, being told that I'm not doing something very well or that I could be better at it. That kind of stung, or at first it would sting. So, and I would do things so that I wasn't setting myself up to get criticized, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let's step back. Let's talk about in your previous life before here, and maybe even leading up in the last year or two as you stepped into becoming a coach and doing training. How did you handle criticism?
Oh, I was defensive. I didn't handle it very well.
And so give us an example. What does that look like if someone's like, oh, I don't know if that's me? Like how?
For me, when someone would start to criticize, I would interrupt. I wouldn't hear what they were saying, or it's like you would listen, but not hear. So I could listen to what you were saying, but, oh, that doesn't pertain to me. I know what I'm doing.
And would that be true even if someone was talking to you? Like I could see how if you're in a classroom or whatever, totally. But if someone was talking one-on-one to you, would you have that same oh, I hear you, but that's not me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally. And the other person may not recognize it. Thankfully, Cassie catches me and calls me out on my shit. So, but if it was anyone else, I'd be like, oh, yep. I would just be agreeable. And in my head, I'd be like, oh, yeah, you're so wrong. And I am so right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that went on until, really recently, right?
Yes. And I'm sure it still goes on. I'll be honest.
Yeah. And what I think is interesting is that as a student, right, at Enchanted Life University, you came fully open to be coached.
Yes.
But when it came to learning how to be a coach,
is really when these criticism walls went up, or that were always there, but they came out, right? Whereas I feel like you came very open to being coached, but when it came to learning how to be a coach, why do you think there was a difference?
Um, that's such an interesting question. I think because I had coached in the past
Mm-hmm.
and I still had the mindset of, and this is really interesting. I don't fix my family anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I still had the mindset in order to be a good coach, I had to fix people.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what you do for me. So why would I do that for other people? But that
Yeah.
was that's where my brain was, is that if I wanted to be a really good coach, I had to help fix people, help
And
fix their
so,
problems.
yeah. And so, how does that fixing tie into criticism and not being able to take that?
Because I couldn't see how to show up to be a better coach. Because I couldn't hear the criticism of I was doing it wrong. And I was also telling myself the story on several occasions because of different things I was doing, is that I'm never going to get this,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm never going to be Cassie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me, just because in the past I always shined at work, nobody saw my flaws because I didn't screw up or they didn't catch it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really is more vulnerable, especially in the beginning, to show up and allow myself to be criticized by you, because I wanted to be perfect. I want to be that perfect coach. I want to be the best version of myself and show up for my clients so that they can have and live the amazing life that I get to live, but on their own terms.
Right. I think it's very interesting that you like compared it to a job in the past, and I think this is where um, it can be harder. So if we can, when you learn and you're really good at a job, like you don't mess it up. But a lot of those skills are, um, I mean, they're not simple, but they're, it's just things you've done, right? Like whether it's organize something or do something, or, and generally we get a job that is really connected to our skill set. Right. But you had, and so that it was probably natural and easy to be really good. And of course you didn't mess up because in essence, you're like kind of dealing with paper and, like we can't, it's harder to mess up. Like there's no human nuance to it, right? Unless you are like in HR, and even that, generally there's like a protocol to follow, right?
Right.
And but when we're dealing with stuff like numbers or data that's not a human, it's a lot easier to get it perfect. Yeah, but when we bring this very human element into it, and this very sacred job of holding space for someone else and allowing them to have their path unfold, there's a lot of room for, because our humanness gets in the way, right? I need to do it
Yes.
right, which ironic. I need to do it right. And so I'm just going to tell you I'm right instead of listening to how to do it
Yeah.
right. I love it. And so you said something like, almost like you look forward to criticism. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I want Yeah, I look forward to criticism now because I want to show up and be the best coach possible. And in order to do that, there are things I need to learn. And so I can't learn those without someone showing me that how I can do something better. There isn't or I think for what we do, there isn't a manual, like a step by step of exactly how to do something. I mean, I know that we have like things that we do differently as coaches here versus anywhere else. So I have that guidance, but I needed to learn how to, I guess, step into being a coach
Mm-hmm.
versus trying to show up as a coach that has all the answers. um,
Mm,
my clients have the answers. I'm just
yeah.
guiding them to it.
Yeah. And it's a lot
So,
of, go ahead.
yep, go ahead.
I
Oh,
was
I
going to
was just
say,
going to say, I wouldn't have caught that if you hadn't lovingly criticized me.
yeah. Because, and that's, um, because we can't without criticism. And I think criticism is a hard word, and you might even change it because
Right.
either the word has become softer in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
or it doesn't feel the same anymore, right? But because criticism is like, oh, they're telling me I'm doing it wrong,
Yeah.
versus really like they're helping me do it right.
Yes. So it's more, instead of criticism, it's more like you're teaching me.
Yes. But when we're not open to being taught when we have to be right, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's that resistance again we talked about last episode.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting because when you show up and you have to be the coach who has all the answers,
Yeah.
that's a lot of pressure. And so, like, if you have to have all the answers right, being told you're doing it wrong really has a different impact than, um, if you don't have to have all the answers.
Right.
Yeah. So, how has learning to ingest criticism or teaching made you a better coach?
Because I show up more open um, to learning, that I really have stepped into showing up more present with my clients, um, versus showing up as the coach who has to fix. um, which is they just feel totally different. It's not how to verbalize this, but I show up being more present and asking them more questions versus telling them how to do something. And that feels it just feels better. Um, I don't even know, and I'm sure Cassie, you can help me with this, but doing it how I was before, not that I was being a bad coach, but I'm definitely a better coach now because I show up differently and I'm showing up using the word better, but I'm showing up being more present and asking more questions. And I feel different as a coach versus how I was doing it 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we talked a little bit about, how you don't have to fix people and it's
Mm-hmm.
really about their answers. So in previous coach training that you had, would you say that you were taught you had to have the answers? Like you had to be like a guru type of person?
Yeah. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm just like super curious, like, was there a set of standard answers? Like, how could you possibly have the answers for everybody? Or what was that? How did they teach that?
I don't remember exactly how it was taught, but it was more like it didn't leave space for the answer to show up.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't really you asked some questions, but you gave
Mm-hmm.
more like, go do this or go do that. And so there really it didn't create space for them to discover the answers that are within them
Yeah.
and kind of choose their own journey versus me telling them what their journey is going to be.
Yeah. I love it. Let's see. So we talked about that. Anything else on coaching and the difference in criticism that you want to talk about? There's one more story that I want you to tell, but anything else about sort of the evolution of coaching and criticism you want to share?
Well, I'll just share this because it makes me laugh. So I remember the first time that, and I'm going to say in my brain, I felt like Cassie yelled at me. And I was like, I remember getting off the call and I told my husband, I'm like, Cassie yelled at me today. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm like, it was awful. And then I was like, I had to recognize that you weren't yelling at me. You were interrupting my defense mechanisms
Mm-hmm.
and giving me the opportunity to grow and open up space to be better. And then just recently, I won't say you were criticizing because now I feel like you were teaching. Um, you said something and you're like, stop doing that. And I didn't recognize I was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But once you said it to me, I was like, oh. And I felt like it shifted a lot faster than the first time. Because the first
Yeah.
time it was like, Cassie's yelling at me. This time it's like, oh, Cassie's pointing out and calling me out on my shit that I didn't even realize I was doing. And so
Yeah.
it feels so much better to not feel like I'm being criticized and not telling
Yeah.
that story anymore. I'm telling the story that, oh, she's trying to teach me something. And for whatever reason, I'm not listening and I want to listen. So I get to choose to open up that space. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that I didn't have defense mechanism in my notes, but it's such a powerful word and thing to be aware of, right? Because when you're in defensive mode, you can't take anything in. Like you're literally like you're defensive, you're pushing everything away. And so whatever those defense mechanisms are, right? I think yours, if we name them, would be to like explain why you did it that way. Um, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and I sometimes I still cringe when you ask me that question, but I recognize now that, oh, she's trying to teach me.
Yeah. And so for those of you listening, one of the questions I do, like, why are you telling me this? Like, but because I don't, I want to find a different word for don't care. It doesn't matter
Right.
like why you did it. It's not in alignment with what we want to do. And so spending all this time in why you did it and defending it to me, like, I don't care, like, doesn't matter because it's not going to, just because you're explain to me why you did something doesn't mean we're going to continue to do it that way. Right. Because
Yeah.
it's not in alignment with what we're creating.
Correct.
Right. And so I did have, before my last story that I kind of want to have you share, how does this criticism also play into writing? How does writing, criticism, and coaching all come together as well?
So I've been writing blogs.
Mm-hmm.
If people are subscribed, they get those. And I can remember thinking that I'm doing this wrong. I'm never going to get this. And there was a lot of, in the beginning, I'm just going to say it was criticism, and I didn't deal very well with that. And I just felt very kind of defeated. Like I'm never going to be this writer. I'm never going to be able to speak to my clients until, and I don't even remember the exact moment it switched, but I had to stop telling that story of I'm never going to get this. And I had to be open to hearing what you were saying and stop fighting against what you were trying to tell me. And again, I think that's the defense mechanism had kicked in for me, where I was being very defensive about some of why I wrote what I wrote, or defending why I wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really stepped into, well, how do I write this? How do I connect with my client? Because I want to be a better writer. I want to connect with people. That's why I'm here. That's why I want to be a coach. And recognizing that I was, I think, pushing that away in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I was blocking getting what I wanted. And that was being a better writer so that I can write my book, so that I can reach more people to say, hey, this is what we do. And it's changed my life and it can change yours.
Yeah. I love it. And you are true. Like very often there's a story that creates, because if the story is, I'm never going to get this, like
Mm-hmm.
there's no, we do get defensive about hearing that stuff. And that story just feeds that, because like, well, I don't need to know it. I'm never going to get it anyway. So I don't need to hear it,
Yeah. And I didn't leave space for it to be any different.
Right. Yeah.
Until I did.
Yes. Yeah. Until you did. And I would even say that's continuous. It's not one time. You've had to do it multiple times. You might have even had to do it last week, or you'll probably have to do it this week, right?
Yep. Yes. Yep. Yeah. It's so interesting. Which I'll be bringing that to the call today, for coach training. But yeah, I want to be a better writer. I want to be a better coach. And in order to do that, I have to tell a new story that I want to learn, and it's not criticism. Cassie's teaching me. And that story feels so much more powerful than she's criticizing me or telling me I'm doing it wrong. The story that I tell now is Cassie's teaching me because she's been doing this for a long time and she's really good at what she does. And I want to learn how to be the best coach that I can be, the best writer that I can be. Whatever it is I want to be, I want to be teachable.
Yeah.
So not only did I show up coachable in the beginning,
Yeah.
now I want to show up teachable.
I love that. Amazing. I think that is an amazing place to end for today. Any final thoughts that you feel like you have to share as we wrap up?
No, that was really good. Yeah, criticism. It's an interesting thing, but you can change that story. So if you feel like criticism is a bad thing, change it to being open to being teachable.
Absolutely.
I think that's all.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing this part of your manifesting success story with us. And thank you all. Of course. Thank you all for listening. And make sure to come back and check out next week where we'll be talking in depth about being versus doing and how inspiration plays into all of that. Talk soon.
The telling of stories is so powerful, both to the person telling it and the person receiving it. Since 30,000 BC, we as humans have told stories to teach and guide. And now we, with Manifesting Success Stories, hope to inspire you to what is possible in your own life. If you want more manifesting success, go to moremanifestingsuccess.com, where you'll find links to anything we've talked about on the show. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, you have the power to write your own happy ever after.